a box full of signatures. And if it contained even a fraction of the traumatic experiences of those who have signed, it might be impossible to carry. Jade Belgrove is at the Prime Minister's front door with a clear message. Your scheme to release offenders from prison early is putting victims and survivors at risk.
We want to be understood and heard, and these people shouldn't be allowed out a day before that we were promised in a court of law. Yes, it just makes a mockery of us.
Before the visit to Downing Street, Jade and 5 other women, all sexually abused as children, shared the floor with Kemi Badenoch.
Prime Minister Andy Burnham should revoke the commencement order now and then work with us for emergency legislation to stop this release before the 2nd of September.
Whilst it's common for opposition parties to call for emergency legislation, it rarely happens in practice. So is this raising hopes and expectations for political gain? How could the Conservative Party support survivors and victims if early release goes ahead?
We are not the government. They are releasing a category of prisoners, killers, rapists and paedophiles, who have never ever been released before. We had early release schemes. No one here is saying that we didn't, but it was not for this category of prisoners. That is the best thing we can deal with now if we want to support these women.
The government says offenders deemed the most dangerous are automatically blocked from early release. Last week, Andy Burnham announced he'd be pausing the scheme for urgent review. But many of the women who received a letter in June telling them the perpetrator in their case might be released early simply do not feel they have the time to pause.
I think it's more like brushing the issue under the carpet. He thinks if we pause it, we're going to stay quiet.
For me, the pause is just pausing the outrage and is giving the situation time to calm down for him to deliver the next blow.
It's not being handled. We got sent a letter and that was it. We've just had to come forward ourselves and fight and speak out. There has been no process and there's been zero support.
In 2024, an independent report attributed the prison capacity crisis to the failure of successive governments to match numbers of prison places with government policies, such as sentencing. You've repeatedly voted for longer sentences. Do you accept that it is contributing to overcrowding in prisons potentially?
As I've said, happy to repeat it again, we didn't build enough prison spaces, and
but
you pointed to one...
My question's about sentencing.
Yes, sure. I mean, and that's obviously, those two things go hand in hand. You have to build... what enough is depends on sentencing policy, so it's fair to draw the line as you have done, and we're frank about that. It doesn't mean that I feel that we shouldn't have done those things, but we should have more adequately provided prison space to enable those policies to function more effectively.
Today, Kemi Badenoch offered 3 solutions: build more prisons, rent prison spaces abroad, and remove foreign offenders to prisons in their home countries. But there was no further detail.
Ria Chatterjee reporting there. Well, that was the verdict of some of the victims. The early release scheme was meant to relieve pressure on overcrowded prisons. But what do the people on the front line of the criminal justice system think? I've been speaking to Tanya Bassett from the probation union NAPO, Paul Foweather, a former prison governor, and Brian Booth, the Deputy National Chair of the Police Federation in England and Wales. You know, we've been speaking for weeks to women who've been victims of terrible crimes, sexual abuse, rape, domestic abuse, and they are understandably horrified at the idea of their perpetrators getting out early. I mean, you can see why the government has responded the way it has, perhaps, with this pause.
Oh, definitely. In some ways, if it were your sister, your wife, your mother, you're someone who's had a serious offence committed, they get a sentence. You expect that sentence to be served. You expect the justice. So you can see how this has caused such an uproar, and actually, with the current position where we're in.
But the truth is, it was done partly or mainly with the prisons in mind. Because, and presumably, the prisons still need to relieve that pressure. Tell us why.
Well, why is 30 years underinvestment. You've now got a government that's in power that recognised when it came in that if they don't do anything by 2028, there'll be nearly 9,700, 10,000 places short. They've introduced this new legislation which is changing the sentencing for the early releases to commence from September. So that's going to reduce some of these sentences, with some caveats that some prisoners won't be released early. That's where the dilemma is, because now that caveat doesn't capture some of the issues that some of the victims now are saying, well, they shouldn't be released.
I mean, that is the truth, isn't it? And there are hard truths here for all of us to have to accept, which is you understand the terrible situation the victims feel in, but there is a real problem here that in the end has a massive impact across criminal justice, not least for the police. You know, Andy Burnham has put this pause in place. Do you want him to stop all early releases altogether?
I would, but that's not going to solve the crisis. You know, and I've got to be a reasonable person. You know, Paul's quite right what he says. There's been underinvestment in the whole criminal justice system for the last, 20, 30 years. You know, we have a backlog of 80,000 cases still outstanding at court. So as many people as you release, you're going to be putting people back in prison again. So it is a real issue that probably no one has the answer to.
And the point about intervening right now, we understand listening to victims, but there are tough decisions to be made.
The nub of the issue now, I think, is that we've got a new sentencing act coming in that allows for this, right or wrong. I would personally say I don't like to see these early releases. It goes against the justice, but something has to give. If it's dithered, and if the politicians don't make timely decisions, what you end with is no man's land. You've got frustrations. You've got lots of prison staff doing lots of work to make this happen. It won't happen unless we're decisive and get it either way. And you've got lots of prisoners with frustrations, and you've got serious potential for problems in jails that's overcrowded with increasing violence. And that's the nub of the problem where we are.
And one of the reasons this was brought in the first place is to stop, to use the common parlance, prisons blowing.
Well, exactly. Exactly.
But we need to prioritise, and the government needs to get that priority clear. So it kind of supports your argument here, Paul, that they need to be decisive. And there are certain individuals who are so dangerous, do not deserve to be let out into the public because they are a danger to the public, and the public are going to be less safe.
Tanya Bassett, we've been talking about the potential for risk and the danger. Any prisoner release scheme, this act included, much of the responsibility ends up with probation. Are you grateful that it's been paused? Can you cope if it goes ahead when he's thought it through, Andy Burnham?
I mean, the focus has been on the prison crisis, but I think the question needs to be, can probation actually cope with this workload and manage people safely in the community? And at the moment, it's not in a state fit to do that. So we don't disagree with the decision to pause, but there has to be enough time now to allow for all that pre-release work to do. And there also has to be a focus on the workload crisis in probation, which at the moment is preventing our members from doing the job that they're meant to do and to do it safely.
So just to be clear on that issue of safety, this plan was brought about, and the idea was that it would free up maybe 6,000-7,000 prison places, which presumably means 6,000-7,000 prisoners under the care of the probation service. I mean, in simple terms, can you cope with those numbers? And could you guarantee that the public would be safe if it goes ahead?
Well, it's actually more than that. Because of the other changes with the Sentencing Act, we're going to see a greater use of community sentences and suspended sentence orders, which means we'll have more people on the books than we currently do.
The truth at the very extreme end is, over the last couple of years, we've spoken to a number of probation officers, whistleblowers, who tell us they go to bed at night terrified of missing someone, missing a key detail, and a terrible crime, creating more victims. I mean, is that more acute right now for your officers?
Absolutely. 65% of staff sickness is due to work-related stress. We're seeing our members having extreme burnout, which then feeds into the staffing shortages that we've got. And you end up in a cycle with the workload crisis. And what's interesting with the Prime Minister's decision to do this, that a week later, he still hasn't appointed a Minister for Probation. And until we have someone that we can communicate with, I'm not sure how they're going to find a way out of this.
The terrible truth of this is probation are not ready for early release. You say, you know, there's a question about justice if it's done, but the prisons need something to relieve the pressure. So who gives? Who becomes, in the end, the person who has to, or the organisation or the part of the criminal justice system that has to just suck it up, broadly?
We're going around in circles. The consequences are that probation service can't keep up with demand. That'll fall back onto policing. Policing make the arrests. We shove them back through the court system. We're back into the prison system again.
There will have to be some final decision taken, maybe in the next 6 months, maybe in September. What can be done now to make sure that whatever outcome is decided, the public are safe?
I think they should go ahead with the early release scheme, but change who is eligible for it. Because we said from day one, domestic violence, sexual offenders should be excluded from this.
The bottom line is you have to do something with the population because it's not sustainable and it's getting worse. What we need to do is take a real strategic approach to say, OK, then, if we're going to deal with the criminal justice system as a whole, it's not just about prisons or police or probation. It's how can we reduce reoffending? How can we support that? How can we be rehabilitative? So actually we're creating and saving a lot of the money and the time rather than building prisons for the future, which we probably can't staff or build quick enough anyway.
I'm really grateful to all three of you for joining us. Thank you so much.